Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued and beloved brothers and sisters throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. This is episode number 13 on our subject, Where is the Hope of the World? I remember in track number 15, it says here on page 88 and page 89, "Let it be remembered that it is after the earth swallows the flood, the dragon is to be wrought with the woman, and to make war with the remnant of her seed, not with her personally, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Revelation 12 verse 16 and verse 17. Clearly then, there is no escaping the conclusion that the doing away with Satan's blood is doubtless the purifying of the church, the destroying of those who have joined the church through the aid of the serpent. This purifying is the very thing that enables the church as a body to keep the commandments of God and also to have the testimony of Jesus Christ, the living spirit of prophecy in her midst. This is her only hope, her only strength, her only deliverance. So here the Shepherd's Rod plainly told us that the living spirit of prophecy in the midst of God's people is her only hope, her only strength, her only deliverance. Now let us read 2 TG 24. It says here, let's read again the statement. It says, "Without vision, you see, the people perish, and also without an interpreter, and without faith, they likewise perish. And this is why the spirit of prophecy is an absolute necessity to the people of God in all generations." In 2 TG 34, on page 20, it says here, "The woman, you know, is the symbol of the sect, the church." Do not forget the statement in 2SR 261, saying, "To John was shown the true spiritual church of God in all ages in a symbol of a woman." 2SR 261. So, to ascertain clearly that that is the true church of God, the only way that you could be able to immediately discern that such church is the true church of God only through the symbol of the woman, according to that reading in 2SR 261, and without an exemption, because the statement made it so plain in all generations, and more particularly to the last generation of men, the people who are designed to be translated to heaven without sin and death. And this is the description given by the Spirit of Prophecy in Spiritual Gifts, Book 3, page 26. The woman is a symbol of the church, and the remnant of the church represents the Christians of the last generation of men, living just prior to the second advent. The dragon makes war on this for keeping the commandments of God and all, and having the testimony of Jesus Christ, which according to the inspired definition of chapter 19 verse 10 is the spirit of prophecy. Here then are the causes of the dragon's warfare upon the remnant. They teach the observance of the 10 commandments and the revival of the gifts, and acknowledge the gift of prophecy among them. When the devil got one foot upon the 4th commandment, and the other upon the gifts planted in the Christian church by Jesus Christ, then his satanic majesty was filled with revengeful delight. But when the remnant whom God designs to fit for translation to heaven without seeing death, ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein, then the dragon is wroth and makes war on them. Spiritual Gifts, Book 3, page 26. Now going back again to the statement 2 TG 34, page 20. It says, "The woman, you know, is the symbol of the sect, the church. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth." Only this church, you see, is favored even by the earth itself. This sect alone is saved from the dragon's flood. saved from being carried away by the flood of hypocrites and tares in her midst. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Here you see the remnant, those who are left after the others are swallowed by the earth, so to speak, keeps the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. This remnant or sect that keeps the commandments of God, therefore, is the only one that inspiration recommends, the only one that is worth joining, the only one that can profit anyone. It alone possesses the power to escape any and all of the calamities that are now brewing throughout the world. It is the only sect that finds favor with God. No other would do, for no other could profit you. Then too, it alone has the testimony of Jesus Christ, the living spirit prophecy in its midst. Revelation 19 verse 10. The Spirit who leads into all truth, who alone can rightly interpret the Scriptures. 2 Peter chapter 20 verse 21. Plainly then, inspiration would have you to join no sect but this remnant. And according to our reading in Spiritual Gifts, Book 3, page 26, one of the description of that sect or group of people is that they did not obey the Ten Commandments only, but also they acknowledge the gift of spirit of prophecy, the prophetic gift among them. Now here in 2 TG 34:23, I would like to read again. It says, since the revelation, the book that speaks to the people of God at this time recommends the sect that keeps the commandments and that has the gift of prophecy. You cannot wisely connect yourself with any other sect. And since God so declares, it must be that there is but one such people at this particular time who have the living testimony of Jesus Christ, the gift of the spirit of prophecy. Moreover, for God to place the gift with more than one people would be for him to cause confusion and disaster to his own work, to thwart his own purpose. Still further, if more than one has the gift, then they all would necessarily have to agree as one. But since there are no two sects that agree with each other, the truth that there is but one sect that has the gift is an absolute reality. And while you may choose to keep the Sabbath commandment, you cannot inspire yourself with the spirit of prophecy. This gift is bestowed upon the remnant by God Himself. 2 TG 34, page 23. Now, I would like to read again, brothers and sisters, the statement given by B.T. Hotep on 2 TG 24 on page 15. It says, now let me ask you a simple question. If the people without a vision and without an interpreter perish, how are they then to get the vision and the interpreter? Saint Peter gives the clue in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 19 and verse 20. We have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto ye do will that ye take heed as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn and the day star arise in your hearts. Knowing this first, that no prophecy of the Scripture is of any private interpretation. Then the shepherd says, here we are told that prophecy, a vision, is the acid test by which to judge purported Bible truth. That is, if the thing is not in prophecy, if there is no vision of it found in the writings of the prophets, then there is no truth in it. Yes, the visions of the prophets are to be our visions if we must be preserved. I would like to connect the statement in answerer number 1 on page 52 and page 53. Now it says, but I would like to begin on page 51. In the days of Moses, some rose up claiming that the Lord was speaking through them as well as through Moses. Numbers 16, verse 2 and 3. Their agitation, however, instead of bringing order and harmony between themselves and Moses, brought confusion and dissension, with the tragic result that thousands lost their lives. Numbers 16, verse 32, verse 35, and verse 49. Had the Lord spoken to those men, He would certainly have made known the fact to Moses. But the very absence of any such revelation made clear to Moses that the Lord was not exalting Korah, Dathan, and Abiram as they claim He was, but rather that they, as a jealous upstarts and impostors, were exalting themselves. Had Moses, as a servant of God, acceded to their demands, he most assuredly would have met with some such retribution as did the man of God who persuaded by the old prophet to turn out of the way and eat bread with him, when the Lord had charged him not to do so, was slain by a lion. Solemn lesson: give no heed to human voices contrary to God's. See 1 Kings chapter 13. On page 53, it says, from this and many other examples, we see that God not only never delegates one agent to alter, to reset, or to countermand the message with which He has charged another agent without His first making the matter known to both, but also that He never honors with promotion those who seek to uplift and aggrandize self, but that He exalts in due season those who humble themselves under His mighty hand. Answerer number 1, page 52, page 53. I think that this passage gives an absolute answer to the question that in 2TG 24, page 15, saying, how are they then to get the vision and the interpreter? Now, concerning the vision, for sure, whatever message or doctrine that God would raise up after Bethel, such message will always give more clearer understanding to the message that was already previously given, the writings of Sister White and Bethel. It will never contradict. And concerning the interpreter, how will we get that such interpreter is divine interpreter? According to our reading, that since it is God who raised up Bethel in 1930 to 1955, if God would raise up another messenger after Bethel, God would have made known the fact to Bethel. The same situation with Sister White, that before God raised up Bethel in 1930, according to Review and Herald, May 9, 1892, the statement they're saying that since they rejected the message in 1888, the prophet declared, we would wander in the wilderness for 40 years. That was in 1890. And then the prophet says, and at the end of 40 years, God would raise up a messenger. And we fully believe that that was Bethel. And to those who read the Shepherd's Rod publications, I think, if not all, majority of them can testify that the Shepherd's Rod, the message of the Shepherd's Rod, give more clearer understanding to the Bible and the writings of Sister White. Now, accordingly, that is the divine character of God, that if God would raise up a messenger that will follow after Bethel, basing the statement in answerer number 1, page 51, 52, and 53. God would have made known the fact to Bethel, or in other words, the description of such messenger must be found in the writings of Bethel, or it must be predicted by Bethel. Now, I would like to read another passage, tract number 11, page 12. It says, a lesson. All present truth believers should now see the necessity of shunning every wind of doctrine, regardless how plausible or reasonable it might appear to be. Remember the words, "Behold, those that go toward the north country have quieted my spirit in the north country." See page 27 on track number 2, the warning paradox. Zechariah 6 verse 1 to 8. Get your doctrine, brother, sister, only from the golden bowl. See the Shepherd's Rod volume 2. And be not like the wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. Be not carried about by the many winds of doctrine that are blowing wildly from every direction to cause you to lose your way to the everlasting kingdom. Track number 11, page 12. Now it is concerning Zechariah chapter 6, verses 1 to 8. Now I would like to read first the statement in track number 2. Let's read the statement. Track number 2 on page 12. It says, "Never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people." It is concerning Zechariah chapter 6, verses 1 to 8, the paradox of the ages. And the Shepherd says that never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people. Never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. For then would its truth have been unavailable to the people in the past and but half efficacious to us now. Necessarily, then, its fulfillment is yet future, sometime in the latter part of the Christian era. What is the latter part of the Christian era? I think that is the last generation of men. The saints to be translated to heaven without seeing death. Now, let us study closely this prophecy. And let us always be God's real people, logical thinkers, not bait hunters, according to 2TG 24, page 23. Now, we know that the people in the generation, in the days of Bethlehem, all of them are already lying unconscious in their graves. But the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 6 are still unfulfilled. So, we need to study closely Zechariah chapter 6, verses 1 to 8. Now, the Shepherd says that, no, the prophecy will not be fulfilled unless it be revealed first. Because for what purpose? They were written and then they will be fulfilled, by which the understanding not given by God to His people. Then for what purpose are they written? Right? In answerer number 2, on page 75, it says, "These prophecies must therefore be revealed in order to strengthen the church in her final warfare. Otherwise, for what purpose were they written?" Answerer number 2, page 75. I would like to read this statement, brothers and sisters, and I fully believe that this is also a very important statement recorded on the Shepherd's Rod. In 3 Symbolic Code number 7, page 4, it says, "You yourself know that such careless and thoughtless interpretations, which pay no attention to language, and which obey neither rule nor logic, are not inspired, but are private and thus inevitably false." So I would like to read again the statement. "You yourself know that such careless and thoughtless interpretations, which pay no attention to language, and which obey neither rule nor logic, are not inspired, but are private and thus inevitably false." So, in other words, the Shepherd's Rod is trying to remind us that grammatical rule is followed in the Scriptures. In 2SR 118, it says, "This grammatical rule is followed in the Scriptures, and it is one way to recognize present truth." 2SR 118, "This grammatical rule is followed in the Scriptures, and it is one way to recognize present truth." Now let us go back, brothers and sisters, to SR page in 2SR 287 up to 288. And it says, what is inspired and what is not? It is one of the most important part in this study concerning the subject, where is the hope of the world? Since we have taken already several aspects, we need only to give short recap to some portion that we already taken. First, the only hope is the gospel. Because according to 2SR 266, only by the gospel proclamation can God save His people through that spiritual house. And for sure, that spiritual house is the sect, the church, by which they will be the one to proclaim the gospel proclamation. Now, we know that the dispensation of the gospel began in 31 AD. Now, for example, I would like to read the statement here in tract number 15 on page, statement given by the shepherd's rod, and plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, it says, page 68, it is clear to see that this woman was clothed with the sun and attacked by the dragon even before her child Christ was born. Yes, years before the Christian church and the gospel came into being. To say then that she represents the New Testament church clothed with the gospel of Christ is indeed as ungrounded and as illogical a theory as to say that the chicken is hatched before the egg is laid. Tract number 15, page 68 and page 69. But the thought that I would like to emphasize in this paragraph is that the gospel came into being in 31 AD, or the commencement of the gospel dispensation. Now, let us try to focus our attention to the subject concerning the seven trumpets. And let us focus our attention to, I think, the fifth trumpet, one of the most important part, brothers and sisters. It is the fifth trumpet. Now, let's read here in tract number 5, on page 60. It says, as Christ is the one who secures Satan's captivity, thereby ushering in the millennium, He alone can be fittingly symbolized by the angel, having the key of the bottomless pit, and by the star to whom the key was given. And as the giving of a thing to any certain one must precede the having of it, by that one the verbs given, Revelation 9 verse 1, and having, Revelation 20 verse 1, and Revelation 1 verse 18, point of course to two different times. Obviously, therefore, Christ received the key at the sounding of the fifth trumpet, sometime before the millennium. Hence, at the commencement of the millennium, He already has it. Christ's mission being to bring deliverance from the prison house of sin and of death, bottomless pit. Let us now focus our attention to the first advent of Jesus Christ. Before continuing, I would like to remind again that according to the shepherd's rod, in 2SR page 69, it says here, the dragon with his 7 heads and 10 horns, with the crowns on the heads, appeared at the birth of Christ as previously explained, and occupies the period parallel with the nondescript beast. The heads are represented by the biblical number 7, meaning completeness, and embrace every religious system in the days of Christ. As the dragon represents the devil who controls the heads, the symbol unmistakably denotes a complete apostasy. It is not intended to reveal the pagan system of worship that was headed by the devil, for it has never been otherwise. It was the Jewish church that had apostatized, and that is what made the biblical number 7 heads. Just such an apostasy had gripped the world in the days of Noah, and its wickedness made the continuation of the world impossible. Therefore, necessity for the good of mankind brought about the flood. The terrible apostasy of the Jews made unavoidable another disaster similar to the dreadful deluge. As God could not overthrow the world by water by second time, and yet keep His never-failing promise to His faithful servant Noah, He sent His Son, to die in the world's stead. Therefore, the world perished not because of the supreme sacrifice of the Son of God. And the world exists today because Christ arose from the dead. 2SR page 69. And that statement is the same with 2SR page 100 and 101, which is our main subject. Now, let us read again the statement here in 2SR page 100 and 101. Just such ignorance of God's word in the days of Noah brought the world to its destruction by water. A similar wicked condition reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. If in the days of Christ, just such hypocrisy, under the appearance of virtue, required the life of the Son of God to preserve the world from destruction, what would the outcome be at this present time? So the Shepherd's Rod is trying to emphasize, brothers and sisters, that if the antediluvian world, because of its wickedness, for the good of humanity, it is impossible that such generation would still be prolonged. And therefore, God destroyed it by flood. The same with Sodom and Gomorrah. And accordingly, the generation in the first advent of Jesus Christ is even more wicked than in the previous generation, because that is the statement used by the Shepherd's Rod in 2SR page 127. It says, the Grecians have never been anything but transgressors. Therefore, the reference can be applied only to the Jewish nations, to the Jewish nation, at which time the once favored people of God would have exceeded any previous record of both moral and spiritual corruption. The Jewish nation reached that condition at the time of the ascendancy of Rome and the first advent of Jesus Christ. But accordingly, even that generation is a wicked generation. It was preserved because of the supreme sacrifice of the Son of the living God. Now, here in 2SR page 100, the shepherd is trying to explain that the last generation of men is even more wicked than in the generation, in the days of Jesus Christ on His first advent. But the absolute fact is that it says, 2SR page 100, He has no other son for a gift to the church, for Christ is the only begotten Son of God. So the only life that can preserve such generation, that God will not destroy such generation, is the supreme sacrifice of the Son of the living God. But the fact is, God has only one begotten Son, and He has no other Son to offer. It says, He has no other Son for a gift to the church, for Christ is the only begotten Son of God. If God's ideal is to bless the world through the medium of His church on earth, and they to whom the gospel for the world is committed have left the ship and are serving the devil in the persons of themselves, where is the hope of the world? Now, before answering, brothers and sisters, this question in 2SR page 100 and 101, let's go back again to track number 5. In track number 5, on page 60, it says, Christ's mission being to bring deliverance from the prison house of sin and of death, the bottomless pit, and to do so through the preaching of the gospel. The K, therefore, must be figurative of the gospel, the only power that is able to set free those who are imprisoned in the bottomless pit. And then it says, because it is very important, brothers and sisters, to understand, because I remember the statement here. Let me read to you in 2SR 258. 2SR page 258. It says, My brethren, these words are not against you, for it is God speaking through His word of truth to save you from the bottomless pit. So to save you from the bottomless pit, will you not let Him work for you and for His people? Will you not be His sheep? Now here in track number 5, page 60, it says, and 61, since the bottomless pit of Revelation 20 verse 3 is symbolical of the earth as a prison house during the millennium, then the bottomless pit of Revelation 9 verse 1, being identical, must likewise be symbolical of the earth as a prison house at another time. Now, I would like to read first 2TG before we'll proceed to the next paragraph in track number 5, page 61. Now here in 2TG, let us read a statement given by the voice of inspiration. 2TG number 13, page 10. It says, "Moreover, let us notice that as decay opened the bottomless pit, the locusts were released. Finally, the fact that the locusts are enemies to those who have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Then the star, the angel that came from heaven and opened the pit to release the locusts, is a friend to them and a mighty enemy to Satan. There is therefore escaping this conclusion. The heavenly star represents a heaven-sent being, the same angel of whom we again read in Revelation 20, verse 1, and the locusts are heaven's rescued multitude. Who else then can the star and the locusts represent but Christ and the Christians? Satan had shut up into the bottomless pit the entire Jewish nation, the only nation that had previously been out of the pit. Christ therefore came to open the pit and to let the captives go free. To such a world was the Lord of heaven sent. When he came, he immediately declared." Luke chapter 4, verse 18 and verse 19. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty that are browsed, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." And then it says, brothers and sisters, here in the shepherd's rod, we need to study closely this very important event, that accordingly, on the first advent of Jesus Christ, the entire Jewish nation had been shut up into the bottomless pit. And Jesus Christ, through his supreme sacrifice, Jesus Christ set them free. If Jesus Christ did not offer his life, according to our reading in 2SR page 69 and page 100 and 101, that generation will be destroyed. Remember, brothers and sisters, according to the shepherd's rod, I would like to read in track number 9. Here in track number 9, on page, let's read the statement here. Track number 9, page 54. It says, and ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, "As all the books of the Bible meet and end in the Revelation, the sealing of the 144,000 must as a result find its completion in the writings of the prophets. And as nowhere but in Ezekiel 9 is found an event analogous to that of Revelation 7, it follows that the marking and sealing are identical, both of which are to separate the wicked from the righteous. The angels in the former is smiting all who have not the mark, the angels in the latter hurting all who have not the seal." See Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4, 5, and 6. And Revelation 7, verse 2 and 3. And Revelation chapter 9, verse 15. Now, we know that Revelation chapter 9, verse 4, 5, and 6 is referring to the fifth trumpet, brothers and sisters, and not the sixth trumpet. And here, the shepherd's rod is explaining that this occurrence is during the sealing of the 144,000. And then it says, "The fact, therefore, that at no time in church history, save in Noah's day, has God destroyed all the wicked and preserved only the righteous, is conclusive evidence in the proof that the marking or sealing of the 144,000 is yet incomplete. Plainly then, among God's people, those who fail to receive the seal are in the figure of the parable represented by thieves and are appointed unto destruction. Whereas those who receive the seal and who escape the destruction are symbolized by the wheat and are destined for the barn, the kingdom." Now, let us now focus our attention to the first trumpet in the days of Noah. You notice, brothers and sisters, that in the parables recorded in Matthew, Luke, Mark, the comparison made by Jesus Christ is in the days of Noah. And then the shepherd's rod says that only in the days of Noah that all that had suffered the divine judgment, all of them are unsaved ones. That is only in the days of Noah. Because in track number 4, let me read to you here in track number 4. The shepherd's rod says the significance, brothers and sisters, that statement that God will, let me read to you. Track number 4, page 40. I would like to read beginning from page 39. Warring against the message. If God's people but sufficiently sense their unpreparedness to meet the coming crisis and could but see themselves standing, as it were, before the mouth of the dragon, they would tremble and faint for fear. But alas, the pall of insensibility enveloping them is so great that he who comes as a harbinger of hope and release, instead of being gratefully welcomed, viciously attack as though he were a fiendish harpy or some gorgon or hydra-headed monster. And all because they know not the hour of their visitation, when the Lord will destroy them in His fury and save the righteous in His mercy. The fact that the names of the children of Hosea's vision are Lo Ruhama, meaning no mercy, and Lo Amai, meaning not my people, when representing the Old Testament period, signifies, as previously seen, that God could no longer extend mercy to the members of His church. So when He punished them by the heathen, the innocent suffered alike with the guilty. But the names Ruhama, mercy, and Amai, my people, show that now, in the latter day period, He will have mercy upon them by destroying the wicked only, sparing all the righteous. Track number 4, page 40. So this occurrence must be in the judgment that pertains to the living, that God will destroy only the wicked, and then God will spare the righteous. The same as in the days of Noah. But that is only to the people that entered into the ark when the given time was come. And according to 2SR, I would like to read this reading. 2SR page 83 rather. 2SR page 183. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open unto us. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, I know you not. As the foolish virgins at last came to the door, it is evident that they obtained the oil. Learn of the message, but there had been a delay. The door was shut, and they were left out. Now, why were they unconcerned at first and very jealous at last? The experience in this instance is about the same as that of the deluge. While Noah preaching the coming of the flood, the world paid little attention to his message. But those who believed went into the ark at a given time, and the door was closed. But not long afterwards, signs of Noah's prediction appeared, and as drops of rain began to fall, the wicked multitude became alarmed and rushed for the ark, but the door was closed, and they were left out. The door that was shut is a symbol showing that probation for the church had closed, just shortly after the foolish virgins became alarmed. At last, they were willing to pay the price and buy the oil. But it was not a change of heart, only the fear of losing out. Their course of action had left them without the seal. The man with the writer inkhorn had passed them by. What a terrible mistake! What a disappointment! Almost saved, but entirely lost. 2SR page 183. And that's why, brothers and sisters, it reminds me the statement in 1 TG number 12, saying on pages 27 and page 28, let's read 1 TG number 12, page 27 and page 28. You remember that while Noah was preaching that a destruction would come from the Almighty, he was also preparing a place of refuge, building the ark. Those who doubted Noah's announcement of the flood and who scoffed at the idea that they should enter the ark for safety at a time when there was not even the slightest sign of threatening rain. You see, the voice of inspiration says that there was not even the slightest sign of threatening rain. Were doubters no longer? When the elements of nature were unleashed, then they madly rushed to the ark. But to their dismay and utter disappointment, they found the door tightly closed against them. Thus all, both good and bad, who choose to remain outside the ark perish. The antediluvian experience should serve as a reminder to us that we be not presumptuous as were they. We should instead take to heart the clear warning that is pertinent to this hour. For we are told that as it was in the days of the flood, so shall it be at the time of the Lord's coming. 1TG number 12, pages 27 and page 28. But I would like to read this reading in 1TG so that we could understand the illustration given by the voice of inspiration. Here in 1TG number 50, page 15, it says, life is but what we make it. So that is the statement, that life is just but what we make it, brothers and sisters. Now it says here, example number 1. Noah was commanded to build an ark and to tell the world that a flood was to cover the earth, that only those who would get into the ark would escape alive. 120 years later, the animals were strangely seen to march 2 and 2 into the ark. Noah and his family also went in, while the rest of the world laughed and ridiculed. But when the rain began to fall, the situation ceased to be funny. Those outside the ark cried, mourned, plead, but all perished as fools only because they had failed to give heed to present truth, had failed to feed on meat in due season. What folly! What disaster! Now the voice of inspiration is plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, why is it that those people in the days of Noah perished in the flood? Because they had failed to give heed to present truth, had failed to feed on meat in due season, and what folly, what disaster. So since Jesus Christ is comparing the last generation in the days of Noah, then for sure, the reason that many people will perish as in the days of Noah because of such foolishness. Brothers and sisters, rejecting present truth. They fail to take heed to meat in due season, which is the present truth. Now, I would like to read here in 2TG 22, page 22. 2TG number 22, page 22. It says, God's Spirit, having been silenced in the North Country, must denote that the messages of God in the North Country were generally rejected, especially the one of the fourth chariot, which caused the Spirit of truth to turn away and to bring truth no more through them, to be silent there. And that, therefore, there is not to be expected any truth through them. Let's ponder deeply this reading, brothers and sisters, and understood what does it says. Now, before elaborating the reading here in 2TG 22, page 22, I would like to read first track number 2. Now, here in track number 2, let's read the statement here in track number 2, page 28. Track number 2, page 28. Saith the Lord God, I will bring Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, from the north. Ezekiel 26, verse 7. Again, when the Jews were returning from Babylon to Jerusalem, God spoke through his prophet, Zechariah, saying, come forth and flee from the land of the north. Zechariah 2, verse 6. Thus identifying Babylon as the north country. But as we are dealing with the fulfillment of prophecy in the New Testament era, the north country in this connection must be antitypical Babylon, Christianized Rome, where God's people during the New Testament period have gone. This clear-cut truth concerning the second chariot leads us to the exposition of the third chariot. Now, first of all, I would like to emphasize, according to this reading, that the north country represents Babylon. Brothers and sisters, that is very plain. And we know that as far as the subject concerning the paradox of the ages in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 1 to 8, I know the most common by which understood by all the obedience to the chariot that goes to the north country, brothers and sisters, for sure they will say that is the second chariot as well as the third chariot. Now, by which we will not disagree. Now, does the fulfillment of the prophecy be limited during the dark ages of religion, brothers and sisters. Now, I would like first to read here in track number 2, page 29 and page 30. It says, the concluding revelation is, behold this, that go toward the north country, have quieted my spirit in the north country. And it says, after the warning message by the Millerite movement had been rejected by the churches, in fulfillment of the words, have quieted my spirit in the north country, God withdrew His spirit from them. In evidence of this, the second angel announced Babylon is fallen. Revelation 14 verse 8. Now in this paragraph, in track number 2, page 29, we can easily discern, brothers and sisters, that Zechariah chapter 6 verse 8 is also pointing to the predicted event in Revelation 14 verse 8. What does it mean by the statement that the Spirit of God have quieted in the north country? It says, meaning God withdrew His Spirit from them. And I do fully believe that in Revelation 14 verse 8, the statement God withdrew His Spirit from them is the same with the statement in 2SR page 97 saying, the second angel's message of Revelation 14 verse 8 had announced that Babylon, the churches prior to 1844, had fallen. That is to say that God would let no light shine upon His word through these fallen churches. In other statement, brothers and sisters, so you see the voice of inspiration is plainly telling here in 2SR and also 2SR page 97 and also to 2SR page 288, which gives an absolute answer saying what is inspired and what is not. And the question recorded in 2SR 287. It says here, the question may arise with some, how can I determine what is inspired and what is not? The prophetic word of God is capable of answering the question and clearing the confusion, dividing the one from the other, as wheat is separated from the chaff. So it is the prophetic word of God, the only one which is capable to answer the question, what is inspired and what is not, is only the prophetic word of God. And for sure, that prophetic word of God is pointing to the symbolical prophecy. Now it says here, first, to the law and the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So it says to the law and the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them, uninspired. Isaiah 8 verse 20. Second, the churches who were in existence prior to 1844 fell with the proclamation of the second angel's message, Revelation 14:8, showing that God would no longer reveal Himself through that channel. So the statement showing that God would no longer reveal Himself through that channel, plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, that prior to 1844, God revealed Himself through that channels. And also the statement in 2SR page 97 saying that God will no longer let light shine through these fallen churches, showing that prior to 1844, the light cometh from heaven was channeled to these denominations, and perfectly corroborating to the statement in track number 2, page 29 and page 30, that it is indicating that God withdrew His Spirit from them. Now, since we already studied several times, brothers and sisters, that the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14 verse 8 was still future in the days of Sister White, brothers and sisters, and it was written in 1888, great controversy, 390, saying that the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14 verse 8 is still future. That was in 1888. Therefore, the application made in 1844 is only primary application. The same with Zechariah chapter 6, because in track number 2, page 29 and page 30, Zechariah chapter 6 verse 8 was attached to Revelation 14 verse 8. Now, let us go back again to the reading, brothers and sisters, in 2TG 22, page 22. Let's read again. 2TG 22, page 22. It says, God's Spirit, having been silenced in the north country, What does it mean? By the statement, God's Spirit had been silenced in the North Country, into track number 2, page 29 and page 30. It says, God withdrew His Spirit. The term withdraw indicates that there was a period of time by which God deposited His Spirit unto them. But when the declaration says that God's Spirit have been quieted in the North Country, God withdrew His Spirit from them. We know that the North Country is Babylon. And it is very important to study closely, brothers and sisters, because there are two typical Babylon. The Babylon before the flood and the Babylon after the flood. Now let me read to you here in 2SR 245. It says here, thus the second angel's message of Revelation 14 verse 8 was proclaimed immediately after the disappointment, saying, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. That is, the world in 1844 fell in the same manner as the one before the flood. So what Babylon that had fallen in 1844? The antitypical antediluvian world, the Babylon before the flood. But what is the empire after the flood? Universal empire, still Babylon, brothers and sisters. And it says here, let us read 2SR 245, that is, the world in 1844 fell in the same manner as the one before the flood. The present world, that is, the world after the flood, is called Babylon because the kingdom of Babylon is the immediate one after the flood. Thus, Babylon becomes the mother of the nations. So this reading in 2SR 245, there are two typical Babylon. The Babylon before the flood, that is the antediluvian world, by which at that time there was no state. It points out only to the church. But the Babylon after the flood, that is the origin of the states, the imperialism. And we know that that is the time when the Tower of Babel was established. That is the Babylon after the flood. Now, let me read to you, brothers and sisters, here in Patriarchs and Prophets 248. Let's read the statement here. Let me see. Patriarchs and Prophets. It is concerning Babylon, or the Tower of Babel. Patriarchs and Prophets on page 100, I think 124. 124. It says, in the professedly Christian world, many turn away from the plain teachings of the Bible and build up a creed from human speculations and pleasing fables. And they point to their tower as a way to climb up to heaven. Men hang with admiration upon the lips of eloquence, while it teaches that the transgressor shall not die, that salvation may be secured without obedience to the law of God. If the professed followers of Christ would accept God's standard, it would bring them into unity. But so long as human wisdom is exalted above His holy word, there will be divisions and dissension. The existing confusion of conflicting creeds and sects is fitly represented by the term Babylon, which prophecy, Revelation 14 verse 8 and 18 applies to the word-loving churches of the last days. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 124. Now, let me read to you the statement here in the Old Symbolic Code. It says here, to Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8. Now, the question says, does Brother Hotep have any light on who the King of the North or the King of the South represent? To Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8. Does Brother Hotep have any light on who the King of the North or the King of the South represent? Answer. The answer to the above question is found in the Word to the Little Flock, one of the earliest Seventh-day Adventist publications, in which Sister White says, I say all that would not receive the mark of the beast and of his image in their foreheads or in their hands could not buy or sell. I saw that the number 666 of the image beast was made up. Page 19. Michael is to stand up at the time that the last power in chapter 11 comes to his end and none to help him. This power is brought to view in Revelation 13, 11 to 18. His number is 666, pages 8 and 9. The above explains that the two-horned beast is the one to whom the number 666 belongs. And that this beast of Revelation 13 verse 11 to 18 and the king of the north of Daniel 11 verse 45 are the same power. Therefore, the nation represented by this particular beast and the king of the north, or the man who is to be the head king of that nation, in the time when this image beast, the two-horn, enforces the worship of his image, whose image is nothing less than the thing he made, or to make a likeness of the religio-political system of the beast before him, the leopard-like of Revelation 13, verses 1 to 10, that is, a likeness of the papal system in the period before the leopard-like beast received his deadly wound. As the fulfillment of this prophecy is yet future, we cannot now tell who will then be the head king of the north of this prophetic nation, modern Babylon, that is symbolized by the two-horned beast. To symbolic code number 1, page 8. Now, I think no one would deny this absolute fact that the two-horned beast points out to the United States of America. Sister White and B.T. Hotep testified that the two-horned beast points out unmistakably to the United States of America. Great Controversy 440. Now, the shepherds had made it so plain that the two-horned beast, this prophetic nation, modern Babylon. Historically, there are two Babylons. We already read that in 2SR 245. The Babylon before the flood, the antediluvian world, and the Babylon after the flood. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. Although the Babylon after the flood, they built the Tower of Babel, but they had not been able to finish their project because God confused their language. But in the vision of Daniel in chapter 7, it was in the days of King Nebuchadnezzar that Babylon reigned as universal empire, brothers and sisters. Now, going back again to our subject, the shepherd's rod plainly telling us here in Revelation 14 verse 8 in 2SR 245 that Revelation 14 verse 8 is applied first in the days of Sister White in 1844, but the world that was fallen in 1844 is the Babylon before the flood, or it is called the antitypical antediluvian world. Now, the Voice of Inspiration says that Revelation 14:8 was the perfect fulfillment, was still future in the days of Sister White, 1888 written. Great Controversy 390. It was written in 1888. Or in other words, in 1888, prophet herself plainly telling us that the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14:8 was not fulfilled in 1844. If the pronouncement of Revelation 14 verse 8 in 1844 is the fall of Babylon before the flood, brothers and sisters, now the pronouncement of the fulfillment, the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14:8 in the judgment that pertains to the living must be the occurrence, the Babylon, brothers and sisters, after the flood. We already given the absolute information given by the shepherd's rod that accordingly, brothers and sisters, that because of that wickedness in the days of Noah, in 2SR page 69, in 2SR page 100 and 101, the world had been destroyed by water for the good of humanity. The statement given by the shepherd's rod says it is impossible, the continuance of that generations, but the generation after the flood, brothers and sisters, is even more wicked up to the time of the first advent of Jesus Christ. But it was preserved because of the supreme sacrifice of the life of the Son of Man, brothers and sisters. Now, how about in the antitypical fulfillment? B.T. Hotep says that the generation from 31 AD up to 1844, I would like to say, because according to TSR page 69, supposed to be, that generation also will be destroyed. But they had been preserved because Christ resurrected from the dead. Right? I would like to read again in 2SR page 69. It says, 2SR page 69, just such an apostasy had gripped the world in the days of Noah, and its wickedness made the continuation of the world impossible. Therefore, necessity for the good of mankind brought about the flood. The terrible apostasy of the Jews made unavoidable another disaster similar to that dreadful deluge. As God could not overthrow the world by water the second time, and yet keep his never-failing promise to his faithful servant, Noah, he sent his son to die in the world's stead. Therefore, the world perished not because of the supreme sacrifice of the Son of God. So, that generation after the flood, supposed to be in 31 AD, they will be destroyed. There should be a general destruction of the wicked at that time. But it was preserved because of the supreme sacrifice of the life of the Son of the living God to die in the world's stead. Therefore, the world perished not because of that supreme sacrifice of the Son of God. And from 31 AD to 1844, supposed to be the preaching of William Miller. Yes, I would like to say the least. Supposed to be, there should be destruction at that time because the people is even more wicked. But it says, the world exists today because Christ arose from the dead. Now, how about the generations in 1844 up to this present time? No, there is no other Son of the living God to offer because God has only one begotten Son. And what would be the outcome, brothers and sisters? What would be the outcome? That is the question. And it says, where is the hope of the world? But according to track number 4, as God had promised in the book of Hosea, brothers and sisters, here in track number 4, let us read again in page 39 and page 40. But I would like to read in page 40, the fact that the names of the children of Isaiah's vision are Lo-Ruhamah, no mercy, and Lo-Amai, not my people, when representing the Old Testament period, signifies, as previously seen, that God could no longer extend mercy to the members of His church. So when He punished them by the heathen, the innocent suffered alike with the guilty. But the names Ruhamah, mercy, and Amai, my people, show that now, in the latter day period, He will have mercy upon them by destroying the wicked only, sparing all the righteous. But who are they that will be spared? It says, hurt not them that hath not the seal, that hath the seal of God in their foreheads. That is the divine command. Hurt not those who have the seal of the living God in their foreheads. Or in other words, the only way that we could be preserved is to have the seal of the living God in our foreheads. And in 1 SR page 28, the saints of God are sealed in all ages with present truth. And that is why is it that both good and bad perish in the destruction of the flood? In 1 TG number 12, page 27 and 28, thus both good and bad perish. Why? Because accordingly, brothers and sisters, they fall, it says here in 1 TG 50, page 15, but all perish as fools. Who are they that perish as fools? Both good and bad. So do not think that you are a good man. You are a good human being. B.T. Hall says in 1 TG number 12, page 28, we should not presumptuous as were they. It says here in 1 TG 50, page 15, but all perish as fools only because they had failed to give heed to present truth, had failed to feed on meat on due season. What folly, what disaster. Would you repeat, brothers and sisters, their mistakes? If you will reject the present truth, the only way that you could be preserved, brothers and sisters, then together with them, you will also perish as fools. What a disaster, brothers and sisters. Here I remember the statement here in Timely Greetings by which B.T. Hotep used the term sealed and then open and close parenthesis. It says preserved. I would like to read here in 1 TG 52, page 17. Of course, the church is His most precious object on earth, and that is just exactly why He is to cleanse it. And that is why He is to slay the wicked in the midst of her. It says, and seal, preserve. You see, what is the significance of having the seal? We will be preserved. The penitent, so that He may have a church clean, without spot, or wrinkle, or any such thing. 1 TG 52, pages 17 and page 18. Think it thoroughly, brothers and sisters. Now, I would like to go back again to the reading in 2 TG. And I would like to quote 1 TG 632, truth is truth and sense is sense. Let us have them both. Brothers and sisters, however hard you will try to oppose the truth, it cannot change the fact. It remains the truth. And going back again in 2TG 22, page 22, God's Spirit having been silenced in the north country. What is the north country? Babylon. What is the divine principle according to SR 221? Revelation is not the prophecy itself. Therefore, Revelation 14:8 is only a revelation of the prophecy recorded already in the Old Testament. And what prophecy that had been attached by B.T. Hotep in the Old Testament concerning Revelation 14:8? Zechariah chapter 6, verse 8. Track number 2, page 29 and page 30. Therefore, Zechariah chapter 6, verse 8 did not reach its perfect fulfillment in 1844. How could it be that the perfect fulfillment is in 1844 and Zechariah chapter 6 had been unfolded in 1930? How could God's people be benefited in 1844 while Zechariah chapter 6 was not yet unfolded in 1844? And that's why it is attached to Revelation 14:8 to let us know that that was only the groundwork. That there are two Babylon. The Babylon that had fallen in Revelation 14 verse 8 on its primary application in 1844 is the Babylon before the flood. That is the antediluvian world we already read in 2SR 245. But in the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, brothers and sisters, Revelation 14 verse 8 must be applied to the Babylon after the flood, by which that is the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy. Now look at to the statement in 2TG 22:22. It says, God's Spirit having been silenced in the north country must denote that the messages of God in the north country were generally rejected, especially the one of the fourth chariot. It did not say, especially the one of the four chariots, but rather, one of the fourth. What does it mean? Grammatically, the statement, one of the fourth, showing that the fourth chariot could not be referred only to one. Because you can use the statement, one of the 24 elders, one of the four beasts. Who are they, the fourth chariot? Let us read first in track number 2. Here in track number 2, this is the absolute answer given by the shepherd's rod. Track number 2 on page 34. The fourth chariot. Track number 2, page 34. Since the first three chariots embraced the history of the church up to 1844 AD, the fourth one must represent a subsequent church organization successor to the Millerite or Philadelphian church, the last of the seven churches. The church of the Laodiceans necessarily, therefore, is the one symbolized by the fourth chariot. Who are they, the fourth chariot? The Laodiceans. But the fact is, the meaning of Laodicean in answerer number 1, page 11, people declaring judgment. And there are two groups of people that declare judgment. The people that declare the judgment that pertains to the dead, and the people that declare the judgment that pertains to the living. And we called it the people declaring the judgment that pertains to the dead, the Seventh Adventist Church. They are the typical Laodicean. And brothers and sisters, that is the shepherd's rod who teach that the Seventh Adventist Church are called typical Laodiceans. Let me read to you here in the Old Symbolic Code. Although we have many proofs, brothers and sisters, it says 3 Symbolic Code number 2, page 11. The fact that most Seventh-day Adventists refuse to investigate and are satisfied that they have all the truth and have need of nothing is further proof that they need the message and that they are typical Laodiceans. 3 Symbolic Code number 2, page 11. They are typical Laodiceans. If there is type, there must be an antitype. That is God's law of type, according to track number 9, page 72. Therefore, if the type is declaring judgment, the antitype also must be people declaring the judgment. The type is declaring the judgment that pertains to the dead. The antitype is declaring the judgment that pertains to the living. And saying one of the fourth, one of them, and let us study closely, who are they that caused the Spirit of God to silence in the north country? In the primary application, what is the north country? The old world, Europe. And no one can deny the fact that during the Dark Ages, the movements that had been raised by God, the messengers that had been raised by God, is in the continent of Europe. But in 1844, God declared that God will no longer let shine from that continent, and God will no longer let light shine to Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, and the First-day Adventists. But how about in the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, brothers and sisters? I invite all the brethren to continue listening and viewing this program. It's a very important subject, brothers and sisters, and I know that those who are willing and sincerely and honestly thirsting for truth and righteousness, there is no reason that you will not continue to listen to this message. Hoping the good Lord will bless you, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.